Okay. Good morning, everybody. Thanks for joining us today. My name is Chris Gerbing. I'm an automation product specialist at Buckle-Smith. I've been in the industrial automation world for about 12 years now in various capacities. And in a previous life, I worked at a custom web software startup company in San Francisco, and I was also a systems administrator for a number of years. I like to refer to myself as a recovering IT guy because truly the PTSD of networks never fully leaves you. But that being said, I'm going to kick off our session today with a brief overview of cybersecurity as it relates to industrial networks, and then a few minutes on some steps that can help you get started on your cybersecurity journey. All right. So the first point about cybersecurity is that it's a journey. There's no stopping point, really, only continuous improvement. Similarly, there is no silver bullet solution or wonder product that's going to take care of all your cybersecurity concerns. It's useful to think of cybersecurity as defense in depth or layers of an onion, kind of like the chart there. So you really have to address each of these layers as much as possible. And the first of these layers is policies and procedures. So this is really the training of your personnel to recognize and respond to things like phishing attacks or other attacks, to enforcing security requirements such as password complexity and age requirements, two-factor authentication, and things of this nature. In terms of physical security, this means keeping your PLCs and other systems behind locked enclosures. Also, the rest of your plant assets should also be protected as far as possible by using fencing, locked doors, prox cards, and other methods, just so that you can determine that only the folks that need access to those assets can get to them. And of course, there's many facets to network security. Your network should be segmented or broken down into small pieces such that all traffic is not automatically sent to all other parts of the network by default. This way, if someone gets, if one portion of your network is hacked, the attack is not necessarily automatically able to affect the rest of the network. You should also disable or password protect access to unused network ports, and also turn off all insecure protocols such as Telnet on your network infrastructure. So can't tell you, I've definitely seen Telnet still enabled in switches in a lot of places. You definitely want to minimize your use of unmanaged switches. Now, I know there are a lot of them in the industrial automation world, and there is a place for them, but we want them at the very end of the network, basically. And always use the most secure authentication methods for network and Wi-Fi access. And then while having a firewall is good, firewall rules are good, a next generation firewall with deep packet inspection and running a purpose-built cybersecurity detection and response system like the Clarity continuous threat detection engine, that's the best. Okay. Just like in the IT world, computers have to be kept up to date. So that means BIOS updates, drivers, your OS, and then your endpoint or antivirus protection all needs to be up to date. Now, as we know in the industrial automation world, this can possibly cause downtime. So best practice here is to run all patches and updates in a test environment if you have one, and then make sure that you've got backups and virtualization so that if you do have a patch or an update that breaks your system, you can quickly revert to your previous configuration. And speaking of those applications, they also need to be updated. And same thing with the computer patching. This can cause downtime. There are uptime concerns here. And in fact, some of our customers, such as those that are under the CFR 21 Part 11 validated environments, they actually can't patch without a costly revalidation of their system. So in this case, we suggest that you just really strengthen all of your other defense levels as much as possible. And then finally, the device level. So lots of devices on your network are running firmware and they are susceptible to being exploited. So not just PLCs and remote IO drops, but think of things like cameras, process instruments, and even things like smart thermostats. I mentioned that because a couple of years ago, there was an attack in California that exploited a smart thermostat that was located on a fish tank in a casino. And the attacker was successfully able to pivot to the rest of the larger network by hacking the thermostat. So the moral of the story here is that you have to know what devices are connected to your network, what they're talking to, and also have ways of detecting when new devices are added. So remember here that the cybersecurity is all about defense in depth. If an attacker manages to defeat one level of your security, then hopefully they will be stopped or at least slowed by the next level. So now that I've scared you a little bit, where do we start? We know that people are in different places regarding their cybersecurity journey, and that's okay. But it seems pretty clear that the rising tide of cyber attacks, as well as recent events, make it pretty clear that this can no longer be neglected. I think everybody's going to have to face this now. It's a big problem. Like, so how do we, it covers things not only just networks or computers, but also your personnel, your plant. So how do we address this problem? Well, like the proverbial eating of an elephant, right? One bite at a time. So you just got to get started. Here are some first steps that we can help you with to start your cybersecurity journey. Obviously, a great place to start would be the Clarity Edge Assessment through Bucklesmith. It's a low cost, low threshold way to get a snapshot of your overall cybersecurity position. And Denise and Daniel from Clarity are going to be discussing and demonstrating this in just a bit. We also have the option of a cybersecurity posture survey, which does also include a Clarity traffic analysis, but also gathers some additional information about your plant, such as your policies and procedures and so forth. And if you're concerned about your physical network infrastructure, we can do an assessment of that as well. A great reference material is the joint Cisco Rockwell Panduit Converged Plant-Wide Ethernet materials. So this is white papers, design guides, best practices for industrial Ethernet networks, and they include validated network architecture. So if you're planning on anything from just a cell to a whole network, including an industrial DMZ, that's a great place to get started, and they're free. You may also want to read into the IEC 62443. That's an international cybersecurity standard. So that's basically how everything is judged against. And for those of our customers here who are in critical infrastructure, you really should read into the executive orders 13636 and 14028. Those really, there are some mandated reporting requirements for attacks on cybersecurity. So that's a good place to go. Also, there is the NIST NVD, or National Vulnerability Database. So that's where NIST keeps track of all the vulnerabilities and exploits. So be aware of that one. And now for a few Rockwell specific tips. So where possible, and we know this is not always possible, put your PLC into the run mode with the run mode switch, not remote run. Doing this is going to make it so that you can't do a remote code change. So it is a hassle, but it also makes sure that an attacker cannot do a remote code change that you don't know about. So this may not always be possible, but that's best practice. Also, you can implement FactoryTalk Security if you don't have it. It is a free role-based permission system. So you can actually integrate this with Active Directory, and that way you have essentially one set of permissions to manage and not several. I'm going to say it's not trivial to implement if you've got an existing system, but it can be done. I would also highly suggest subscribing to the Rockwell Industrial Security Advisory Index, and that's the knowledge base article number there, PN 1354. So this is where Rockwell discloses all of its known CVEs, as well as workarounds for those, and patch numbers or estimated patch dates if applicable. And that is free, and it's it's updated quite often, and what you need is just a rockwellautomation.com free account for that. And then just also like on IT networks, OT networks just need to be able to prepare for and respond to not just cyber attacks, but disasters, hardware failures, or anything else that can cause downtime. So you need to be on top of your backups, and as well as version control. If you're making changes to your PLC programs, and you need to make sure that you have the right versions in your PLCs. I highly suggest looking at FactoryTalk Asset Center for this. Also virtualization, so you can immediately spin up a copy of a workstation or a server. And this not only for cyber attack, but for hardware failure as well. In the future, we will have something called Cybersecurity, which is a new certificate-based system that creates encrypted, authenticated communications between Rockwell Automation devices. So it can't be snooped on. If it is snooped on, there's no data that they can use from it. You should be aware that adding encryption to a industrial control network is going to significantly affect network throughput, but that not necessarily a deal breaker. It can still work for many applications. Okay, so that's my quick tips for you, and I'm going to go ahead and stay here for any questions that you might have, and feel free to contact us if you'd like to discuss anything more in depth. Now I'm going to turn it over to Denise and Daniel from Clarity. I want to mention that when I first saw what Clarity, the continuous threat detection engine technology, does, I said to myself, if I were in a medium-sized industrial network, if it was my responsibility, I would definitely want to be using this product. It is very cool, and it is very different from what you see in the IT space. So with that, I will go ahead and turn it over to Denise.
All right, let me share my screen. Here we go. All right. All right. So thanks, Chris. My name is Denise Silva, and I'm a sales director with Clarity. Thank you for taking the time to join. So I had a few slides to go over. A lot of this information will kind of piggyback on the information that Chris shared, and then I'll pass it over to my counterpart, Daniel, for more of a technical review of some of the information I'm going to cover. So, as Chris mentioned, we know that the IT and the OT worlds are drastically different. I like this slide because it shows really the convergence of the two worlds, right, of IT and OT, and more specifically, how different they are. And so, from an IT perspective, it's a unique environment. And for an example, like if there was an issue, say with an endpoint had been compromised within an IT infrastructure, the protocol would probably be something like, disconnect the endpoint, run some forensics, remediate, and reconnect. But on the OT side, we realized that that could never happen. We can't ever afford to have that type of downtime or that luxury to take something offline. And that's just to show that these obviously environments are totally different. And there's also a convergence to them of seeing how we can utilize maybe some of the investments from the IT and pull them to the OT side. And we'll show you kind of how we see that. But when we look at the Clarity platform, you'll hear us kind of talk to these four kind of key pillars or buckets: and reveal, protect, detect, and connect. And this is, how we see our platform, as well as kind of the points that Chris was making of kind of where to start on the journey and why those are important. So when we first start, we're looking at reveal, because we know from an asset discovery point that you can't protect what you don't know and what you don't see. A lot of times, in the past, being able to understand what the assets were is, kind of walking the plant floor, with a pad and paper and writing those down. Now there's a better way to do this from an asset discovery, and that we're able to show you that starting point of what you have in your infrastructure. But more importantly, or just as important as understanding what your assets are in your environment, is really how those assets are talking to each other, how they're connected, how they're configured, maybe the firmware, the patch level, and just how they communicate across the infrastructure is equally as important. And we give you that information in the Clarity solution. And then once you understand, or once you know what those assets are in your environment, you can start to understand your risk and vulnerability of your OT environment overall, and then look to see kind of maybe what common vulnerabilities exist, maybe what security threats are against those assets that we've discovered in that reveal phase, and then really start to put controls in place to mitigate those risks, such as misconfiguration or assets being managed incorrectly. And then we move to the detect phase, and that's really, at this point, you've discovered your assets, you're starting to kind of understand what your vulnerabilities are, and then you can start to have a baseline of kind of what your, from a threat detection piece in real time, we can show you those baselines, and then show you how those, surface up in our platform, kind of those variants or changes in those baselines. And then the final piece there about connect, and that's the real kind of challenge with OT security, I believe, is integration, integrating the IT world, as I mentioned, into the OT world, and really maximizing those investments. And when we look at the Clarity difference, that Chris had mentioned, it's a journey, and that's really kind of what this slide is really showing. It's that it's a journey, and it's really understanding kind of where you want to start that journey. Is it understanding your assets, or maybe it's I want to understand from a secure remote access point, how do I do that, or just getting an assessment of those endpoints from an edge product, but definitely a journey. And then Chris also mentioned from a Clarity perspective, those, not only just the PLCs, maybe the sensors, but smart grids, HVACs, the fish tank that Chris had mentioned, all of those, we look at from a security perspective and how we're putting controls around those. And you also heard me mention from, a value perspective of being able to utilize, being able to utilize those IT investments. And so this is really showing, this is not a full encompassing list, but just to show you that these are some of the partners that we work with. From our robust API, we're able to connect into a lot of these solutions and really giving you the best ROI from that IT side, bringing it over to the OT side. And then furthering on as far as the journey, we see it, we say, it can be an on-ramp into those solutions. And Chris mentioned the Clarity Edge product. We're seeing a lot of our customers kind of starting from that perspective, even before they get to the stage of really understanding their full assets in their environment. The Clarity Edge product can give you kind of a snapshot in time of those assets to begin to have those internal conversations of those next steps in your journey. And this is really a snapshot of the kind of a couple of the solutions that I talked about so far. The Edge that Chris talked about, Daniel will go into it a little bit more, the continuous threat detection solution, and then the secure remote access. And that is all I have. I will stop sharing and over to you, Daniel.
All right, thank you. Coming to you from Las Vegas today. I'm actually out at ISC West, getting hands-on with the future generations of IoT devices. So we always try to stay ahead of where the market is going. But you're probably wondering at this point, what is Edge? What is this thing we've been referring to? So Edge is an executable. This is how we've been able to gain so much information about a customer's network and environments by just running this executable on one of your engineering workstations on the plant floor. Now, of course, we recommend doing this in potentially a lab environment to start out with, or whenever there's an outage, because it is an active scan of your network. But it's not just a typical active scan like we're used to with a scan gun and IT. What Edge is actually going to do is very smartly approach the network. And let's dig into what exactly I mean by that. Now, we have here the executable already loaded on this workstation. And as you saw, I just double clicked on it and it popped right up. And you can, of course, use a thumb drive if those are allowed in your environment, or you can, through orchestration, send it out to all the machines, just like you would typically when you would deploy an active agent on the IT side. But where things start to change is that in our host discovery here, we can put exclusions in that are specific for ICS. And we can allow or disallow local network discovery. And of course, we work across IT, OT, and IoT devices. So you actually get customization for each of those. And we start out, I like to refer to it as like a smart active, where we start out with the type of request that any device can answer. All right, so that would be IPv4 type of request, a ping, a port scan, things of that nature that are relatively light. And that's where we really start to differ from the traditional tools that have been out there, because the traditional IT tools, they ask, are you a smartwatch? Are you a Fitbit? Are you a thermostat, as Chris had just suggested. So they have to go through a lot of those asking the wrong questions. And so what we're doing here that's so different and so unique for industrials is we're starting out with those regular host discoveries. And if we're allowed network access, which we can run the agent just locally if we want to just parse files on this local instance. But whenever we get network level access, we do really light broadcast discovery. And you actually see here that we have the proprietary protocols that are built in from the manufacturer. And many of these are actually our partners that we've worked with, many of which have actually invested in Clarity, including Rockwell, Schneider, Siemens. And an important note there is we're actually vendor agnostic. And so really smartly, a lot of these companies have come together and relied on the intelligence from Clarity to put together a solution and actually do factory acceptance testing of our understanding of these protocols. So when we send a discovery, we're actually sending the manufacturer's discovery. When we send out direct queries, we're actually sending the specific direct query that the PLC is expecting to respond to. And that's really what's so game-changing about Edge and our ability to get in, get a really good understanding of your network, of your assets, and what type of risks and threats we might have. So this is actually a little bit older version of Edge here in my demo environment, but we have so many extra protocols built in multiple different flavors. And we're constantly expanding this product, including being able to run integrations directly from Edge, being able to tie into your asset center, for example, and be able to show what is or isn't in your asset center. And then we can set that up on a recurring task. But I'm going to move forward here. So why we have all those customizations is sometimes maybe you want to exclude a particular vendor, or maybe you want to exclude a particular part of the line. So you'll be able to make those different tweaks here. But I'm just going to use the default parameters, and I'm going to hit next. And what we generally do on a security assessment is we'll have it saved to a file, and we'll just have you go out and run the file. We'll save that file, and then we'll use that for the posture assessment to be able to do our reporting. And that can gain us a ton of value and really expedite either our ability to deploy other solutions, mitigating tasks and cybersecurity, being able to, as Chris suggested, defense in depth, being able to figure out what type of decisions we need to make to protect us for the future. And so what we can do is take that file, generate a set of reports out of it as a posture assessment through Rockwell. And we've had a lot of success and gained a lot of ground doing this. And we even have people reaching out to us saying, hey, we're buying another company, we're going through an acquisition, and we want to make sure that all the PLCs and things are kind of up to date that we're purchasing, and figure out a game plan going forward for licensing for the next year. So we have a lot of really unique use cases coming out of our posture assessments. But what I'm going to do here is I'm actually just going to connect this in real time up to our CTD, which this is what you would do if you had a full deployment. Now, what I'm going to do is just grab this IP here. Sorry, you get to see the business end of some of this stuff here, since we're doing a direct connection, and type in our password. See if I got my password right. All right, and we can start running that. And now what Edge is going to start doing here, as I referred earlier to this as a kind of a smart active approach, Edge is actually going to start out with, again, requests that any device on the network ought to be able to respond to answer to. So ping sweep, report scan, and as we start to learn and enumerate the assets on the network, we'll know that it's a Rockwell device, we'll know that it's a Windows device, and we'll be able to tell what type of broadcast query is next most appropriate for the network. So we're not going to be filling the network up with a bunch of things that are not really needed or useless. Additionally, we're going to constrain the subnet. And then in the directed discovery, which it's currently running now in this little progress bar we have on screen, what it's going to be doing is actually customizing and filling out a set of queries that are pertinent just to the assets that you have on the network. So again, instead of asking, 3, 4, 500 questions of a particular PLC, of which it can only answer maybe 10 or 12, we only ask those 10 or 12 questions that are pertinent to your environment. So that's really what's special about this. And this is actually a patent pending product that we've come up with, and it actually will drop right out of our CTD as well. And it works in concert. So you can have our secure remote access product perfectly integrated with CTD, integrated with Edge, and they're completely fluid, and they all help enrich each other's data and can run continuously. So with that, this directed discovery is still going. Normally, I see about a 10-minute time period for this to actually run and complete on most networks. And again, preferably during an outage so that we can see how it performs. We are SIP ready for Rockwell SIP. And in fact, Rockwell has started running our Edge software on their secure compute modules. So there you can actually order a line item from Rockwell, from Buckles, that will have the SIP secure module on there, and we'll still have complete visibility of all these devices. So really special relationship we have there with Rockwell, of course. So let me go ahead and jump over to CTD here. Now, I already ran this earlier, so we get a little bit of TV magic here. You get to see it already baked. But what we can see is we don't have that threat detection part. Now, we are on a CTD server, so normally we would see that, but because we don't have the span port, we don't get that level of detail. However, we do get all of our risk and vulnerability information, and we get full asset visibility. And I'll show you exactly what I mean by that. Now, if I just click on my OT assets here, I can see I have all of my PLCs. I have a network topology, but I don't have the relationships between the PLCs and the different session flow. Now, that is something that is unique to our CTD product. But what I have been able to do in just that short period of time, about a 10-minute window, as I recommended earlier, is I can dive into any one of these PLCs, and I can see that, it was collected by Edge. I can see the desktop that it was collected on. I get the firmware, the model number, the serial number. If I go into my device information up here, and I can see that Edge has actually been able to supply me all of the backplane information. So this is the level of quality and detail on the network that you would always expect from Clarity, just in a really lightweight executable that you can run in about 10 minutes. You don't have to know a ton of detail to query the network in advance. We don't have to work with the system teams or IT teams for a long period, or inverse, the engineering teams. Just preferably that we either do this in a lab first, do this during a maintenance window, see how the system performs. And we regularly have people running this on live environments to be able to do things like configuration change mapping. In addition to just getting good asset visibility, we of course have full risk and vulnerability built into Edge here. So we can actually see all of your full match CVEs. We're able to do something called CPE here, a common platform enumeration, where we're still able to triangulate the CVE across the make, the model number, the CPU, and that gives us really, really accurate detail on CVEs. So definitely something to look into. And of course, as always, we have some of the proprietary databases supplied to us by Rockwell, Schneider, Siemens, and all the top vendors out there. Going into the reporting, so real quick on the risk assessment report, as part of the posture assessments, of course, you'll get a full risk assessment report that we can generate directly out of CTD. Now, this can be an automated report where it's relatively generic in that it provides everything out of the platform, and where we can go a step further and really dial into your specific needs in a posture assessment is by going through and creating custom queries. Now, what I'm going to do is just grab some of my Rockwell devices real quick, and I'm just going to select all of these, and I can come in here and create a custom query based on, let's say, firmware. So here I can see all of my firmware over time. And this is great for, again, being able to forecast, look at configuration changes, and being able to manage that. Now, we'll do this as part of a posture assessment, create these queries, and export that as a report. In addition, we have our full insights that we can pull out of the system. And this is going to be able to show us things like unsupported operating systems, be able to show us where we might have telnet. That's one that Chris was mentioning earlier. And we can actually locate where those devices are so that we can do the remediation quickly, smartly, more effectively than we've ever done before. So Edge has really been a game changer for a lot of our customers. Some of our largest customers, immediately when they saw it, they knew what we were going for. so they went out and threw it in a lot of places. And I've personally been very impressed with the data that we've gotten out of it. Again, with about a 10-minute working time. If I pop open that device here, we can see that we're coming up right at about 10 minutes, and it's about 94% here through our directed discovery. So that's about complete. But yeah, with that, I think we can open it up for questions, or I'll hand it back over to Buckles there if anyone had anything that they wanted to ask about me. But that's a real brief overview of what Edge can do for you, and the level of detail that we can pull out of your network really, really rapidly.
Okay, awesome. Thanks, Daniel. And thank you, Denise, and thanks, Chris. We've got a couple of questions in the chat here. I'll read them off here. First one says, thank you for addressing such a pertinent topic. I have several unmanaged switches in my plant. Is this an issue?
I can answer that one. This is Chris.
Okay.
Yeah, there's a few things. I mentioned unmanaged switches. So there's no port security on unmanaged switches. That means that anybody with an Ethernet port and a cable can come in and plug into your network. Whereas in a managed switch, you can actually block those ports off, or actually with our Stratix switches, you can have your control system need to log into the control system that will enable a port for you. So that's one thing. Also, they have no smarts, so we don't know what's going on in that particular part of the network and with those devices that are connected to it. And then a last thing I would say is that while it's not strictly security related, unmanaged switches don't have loop protection. And I have had customers here in the Bay Area where a operator walked by an unmanaged switch and saw an unplugged Ethernet cable, and so plugged it into the unmanaged switch. Well, unfortunately, that plug was already plugged into the unmanaged switch, and so he created a loop, which caused a broadcast storm. That's when packets don't time out. So it keeps adding more and more and more and more packets because these packets don't time out, and he took down this entire network. So this was for a large beverage bottler, and they lost over a day of production until they figured out what had happened. So as you can see, that's why I have a healthy fear of unmanaged switches. Hopefully that answers your question.
Great, thanks, Chris. One more question about switches. one person asks, how or where can I learn more about managed switches?
Yeah, there's a number of places. I'm going to blow our own horn and say that we actually have a class coming up, an introductory class on, I believe it's April 28th, where you get hands-on access to some remote hardware. So we've been doing all of our labs remotely now, and you will have a chance to do some initial configuration for about 3 different kinds of managed switches, and that's free. So definitely go to the Bucklesmith webpage, go to our training page, and you'll see seminars, and then look for I believe it's called Networks 101, and sign up for that.
All right, great. All right, a couple more here. Is the Clarity platform standard across industries? Is it possible to get a deeper demo pertaining to pharma?
Yeah, absolutely. We have the same platform across 18 different industries, and that's where we go into kind of a system tuning conversation. Pharma, for example, can have a lot of batches. So you might have a scenario where you make one molecule 1 week and then switch to a different one the following. And that's something that we're quite familiar with. And we have a lot of references in that space as well to being able to get the system to really serve your exact purpose. So we'd be happy to do an extended demo with you.
Great. Okay. Last one here. I need to implement cybersecurity at my facility. What steps should I take to get this started? Is there a specific contact I should reach out to?
Yeah, I can take that one also. Yes, you can just reach out to either me, Chris Gerbing at Buckles, or if you have a Buckles account manager, definitely get in contact with them. And then we can have some initial discussions on where you are and kind of how you'd like to start, and then bring in our partners like Clarity. We also have, of course, Rockwell Networks and Security Services, or NSS, and they do everything from patch validation to full monitoring and design and implementation of industrial control networks, including industrial DMZ and all the good stuff that we recommend in industrial control systems. So just reach out. We're happy to help.
All right. Awesome. And actually, one more. How quick is the process to get up and running with the Clarity solution?
Yeah, pretty quick. It depends on your particular environment and which solution we're talking about. If it's edge, doing a posture assessment, generally those posture assessments can be ran within a day or so, but of course, we want to go about this smart, understand the architecture, and always approach with caution, because, of course, the process matters the most. It's how we make all of our goods and products. So generally, a pretty rapid deployment. However quick you might be thinking, imagine about twice as quick as how quick we can run. so very, very rapid. Yeah.
Okay, great. All right, well, if there are no more questions, remember you can always email us at info@buckles-smith.com, and we'd be glad to answer any questions. Also a reminder that you can give us your opinion on the webinar through the upcoming survey after this is over. And I guess just to wrap it up, thank you all for joining us today. Big thanks to Robert and Chris from Buckles, and Denise and Daniel, and everyone at Clarity for partnering with us and making this webinar happen. Hope you all found it informative and enjoyable. So thank you, and enjoy the rest of your week.
Thank you all.